welcome back to another episode of Mystery Red Reads. I am your host, Mystery Red, and this is my disclaimer. This beta read in Concord is at the author's request. This video is for learning purposes. Today we're looking at a piece of original fiction. We are looking at chapter 19 of Recurring, formerly known as The Lake of Haunted Memories by Ladybugs88. The title of the video will be Lake of Haunted Memories, and I'll be noting the title change, Recurring, which is a change that Ladybug made a couple chapters back. If you've been following us, we have an entire playlist for Ladybugs88. I have been reading this story, formerly known as The Lake of Haunted Memories, now known as Recurring. And I've also read a couple chapters of another story that she has called Remains. So, on that note, we are now with Barb. Last chapter, we were with Ruth. So, and Barb is snarky, so let's see what outrageous things this woman... Oh, the nerve of this woman. Let's find out what kind of trouble she gets into. Chapter 19, Barb. Although the concentric rings around the lake still troubled Barb, she pushed them aside on her mind. On her mind? In her mind? In her mind? Okay, let's try that again. Although the concentric rings around the lake still troubled Barb, she pushed them aside in her mind and focused on setting up and calibrating the multi-probe sonde. She then lowered it over the gunwale and watched the scale on the cable roll forward until it showed the 3 feet mark, the first measurement depth. Watching the handheld display, she waited for the readings to stabilize, but they never did. Minutes later, digits still flashed randomly on the screen in a manner that made no sense. For the pH, it showed 8.26, followed by 4.53, then 9.68. Considering the pH for water rarely deviated far from 7.0, these values marked a problem. Worse, the temperature measurements jumped everywhere between 32 and 59 Fahrenheit. At one point, they dipped down to 18.3, an impossible value because below 32, water would have been solidified into ice, which was less dense and would have floated to the surface. Nowhere did this lake have an ice cover. Okay, so I'm thinking paranormal, okay? And my reader impression of that is something paranormal's happening here, where you're not getting clear reads and you're getting interference. Several minutes later, the digits were still oscillated widely, rising, falling, up, down, up again, down again. Wide variations like these often happened when the sonde touched a solid surface, like a rock or the lake bottom. That could confuse the sensors, but the lake couldn't be only 3 feet deep, especially this far from shore, and she could lower her paddle at least 8 feet into the water without touching anything solid. She pulled and released the cable, ensuring it wasn't stuck or touching the side of the canoe. It flowed freely. She allowed it more time to stabilize. Anna yelped. "The air dancers! They're splitting in two, all of them! Oh my God, it's so amazing! It started at the top with a furrowing right down the middle of the head and continued down through the body. Now each split half is regenerated its missing part. I think they're reproducing by binary fission like a flagellate." What was wrong with Anna? Had she been studying too hard for her qualifying examination? On the handheld display screen, the readings still fluctuated. Barb reviewed the calibration steps in her mind and confirmed she hadn't missed any. How could she have, considering how many times she'd used the equipment? So many, it was second nature to her by now. Modesty aside, she was a rock star with the multi-probe sonde, and it had never behaved this way before. It had worked perfectly at Sparkling Lake, so why not now? Could the crash have damaged the sensors? That was a $12,000 piece of equipment, and she'd signed it off from the department, so it would be her responsibility to return it undamaged. On the LED display, high and low readings still alternated. This deserved concern. But Barb wouldn't let that get to her. If the first sampling depth wasn't working out, she would move on to the next one. At 10 feet, the third sampling depth, she once more waited for the readings to stabilize, but again she had no luck. After giving it several minutes, she moved on and lowered the sonde to 15 feet. The third sampling depth. She peered at the LED display, eager for consistent values, and waited, trying to convince herself it needed more time. Random numbers still flashed on the display. The next temperature it showed was 39 Fahrenheit, or 4 Celsius, water's highest density, at which it sunk. It couldn't remain on the surface. Could Chevanet be only 15 feet deep? Unlikely, considering the anchor had failed to reach the bottom. Barb turned her head and asked, "How deep would you say this lake is?" Carl glanced up from the plankton net. "Sparkling Lake is about 64 feet at its deepest." The huge difference made no sense. Something is wrong with the sonde. Did you forget to swab the cups? Carl asked. Of course not. I've done this before. Barb would have never made such a rookie mistake as not replacing the storage cup with the sampling one. And I've calibrated it too. Assuming you did it right, of course, Carl giggled. Ha ha ha, Barb tried to hide her irritation. Since when did she do anything wrong? The Secchi depth was off too, Carl said, and I've got nothing in the plankton net from 3 feet. So the lake wasn't eutrophic, as Barb had suspected earlier. This made no sense, because sunlight supported high rates of photosynthesis, causing the topmost layer of a lake to have plenty of phytoplankton and zooplankton that ate it. Today was an overcast day, but I don't think we need this giant line through all of this just to say, add the word "and." That is just silly. Okay, today was an overcast day, but it couldn't be like this every day. The net should have caught something. It caught nothing at all. The bottom cup is empty. Isn't that strange? Uncanny. The crash could have damaged one or more sensors in the multiprobe sonde, or perhaps its electronic mechanisms, but the plankton net had none of that. The only way to damage it was to sever the fibers or puncture the plastic cup at the bottom. Have you checked for tears or holes in the net? Sure did and found none. The cup shows no damage either. I'm thinking it may not be the equipment and that it may well be the lake. The lake? Barb glanced over her shoulder. Had Anna told Carl this was Lake Chevanet? But Carl said nothing else and kept her gaze down to the net. Besides, Barb had made sure Anna hadn't spent a single moment alone with Carl. Could she have suspected something on her own? No, if she had, Carl wouldn't have played along and would instead have pestered Barb about it. Could Anna have told Ruth, who then told Carl? But in that case, Carl wouldn't have waited until now to mention something, so it must have been a purely coincidental comment. It may well be the lake. Barb recalled from her in-law's story something about an attempt to dredge the lake after the second logging crew disappeared in 1967. Some equipment malfunctioned and caused additional deaths. Allegedly, it shredded a guy to pieces. His eyeball fell by someone's feet and his teeth struck someone in the face. Barb recalled how she'd roared with laughter. But could some electromagnetic abnormality in the lake have caused their mechanisms to fail or misbehave? She watched the handheld display, the digits flashing by like an encrypted code. Had she made a mistake coming to Lake Chevanet? Was something actually wrong with the lake? Oh my gosh, now's a good time, Barb, to get on the bus. Now's a good time. You're in the middle of the lake. Girl. Oh, wow. Well, I mean, at least it's starting to finally dawn on her that it might possibly really something might be not right about this place. Forget all the signs of like thorns and eyeball fruit and grass that just ripped into Anna's hands and just, oh my gosh, and just general creep factor. Because sometimes if you get into the proximity of a certain place, it has like an energy about it, and you can be like, nope, no, thank you. It could even look sometimes with that energy, and I know everybody has felt it at one point or another, and some image is probably popping to your mind of when you've had that experience. But when you come across a place with energy that is just off, there's just this feeling that kind of comes over you. Sometimes, if you're particularly sensitive to energies, you might even feel it like in your gut, like you might feel a wave of nausea just based on an energy of a space. But you can look at it and it'll also have kind of a sort of ominous look to it. Or it could look, completely innocent, like normal, and you could still just be feeling something if you're sensitive to energy. I personally am very sensitive and have definitely walked up on space and been like, I'm not too sure about this. Where I'm at, we have the famous Waverly Hills Sanatorium, which I was fortunate enough to get to chaperone a field trip to a couple years ago. And it was interesting because I went in skeptical. Because, get a little musing at the end of this video. I went in skeptical, thinking I'm not afraid. I don't not believe in energy. I don't not believe in something like that. But I also believe some people invite things in. And so what's tricky about Waverly is that it was designed for tuberculosis patients. And so it is an open air building. So it is completely designed for air to flow through the space. So it's actually meant for drafts, okay? And so when you're walking around it, it's largely a ruin, okay? It's largely a ruin. But when you're walking around it, there's if you're like I went in the fall, so it can be windy and cold anyway, all right? And so it's hard for me to say, yeah, I felt a chill because, it's windy anyway. It was chilly anyway. However, if you're in a place and it's cold and then you hit a cold spot in the place and you're kind of like, ooh, oh, it's extra cold. And it's a different kind of cold in a couple of places. And the building is very, very interesting. It is also hugely dangerous. Yes, you could walk somewhere and fall through a ceiling. It's amazing that people are allowed to tour it. And we got the combination of history and paranormal twist. So it was a very interesting place to visit. And when I left it, uh, there's an there was an uncomfortable sensation that kind of rests against like my back, neck, and shoulders. Uh, just an unsettling kind of sensation that kind of settled there as we were leaving. And I had thought that the further we got away from the building, the better, that feeling would go away. And I actually wanted, I was waiting. I remember riding the bus with the kids, waiting for that sensation to kind of go away. And I had an unsettling kind of feeling. I feel like it was probably for the rest of the day, and could not wait for it to go away. So yeah, it definitely is not. There is something about it. Did we experience anything? If you're wondering, on the third floor, I believe it was when we got out, she said, she was telling us the history of the room, and as she was talking, I started feeling like this tickling kind of, like if a breeze blows just a couple strands of your hair and it kind of tickles a little bit, and it was at the top of my head, around my forehead, and I kept touching it. And as she's finishing up her conversation, I saw a couple other people doing the same thing. And she's like, at the end of her history thing where she was explaining like it was a nursing home one point, it was a TB hospital. She's telling me about what floor, what was done on each floor as you'd go to it. And then she's like, and sometimes what most people experience here is like, they'll feel like somebody's blowing on their neck or on their ear or messing with their hair. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But that happened. And then on that same floor, we were walking down the hallway, and at the end of the hallway is a stairwell. And next to the stairwell is an elevator. And then to the next to that is an operating room, or what was the operating room. And beside the operating room is also the supply room and the wash-up room where they'd get ready to do surgery. In that particular operating room, they would, as a last resort to save someone, remove ribs, so in hopes that would help them breathe better. I know it's horrific and it's true, and it seems barbaric to me, but then medicine largely seems barbaric to me. And so they did that, and most of the people that underwent that surgery died. And so that operating room was right next to the elevator, and that elevator leads down to the basement where they would take them out. And then at one point they had so many people dying, they were taking them out to what is known as the body chute. So it's a very interesting place. But as we were walking down that hallway, I heard something that I thought sounded like kind of like a ceramic bowl with a spoon in it. Like if you eat cereal and your spoon swirls around, you put the bowl down and the spoon swirls around and clinks in the bowl. That's what the sound sounded like to me. And it came from the stairwell area. So our guide went over to the stairs, and she's calling up and down to see if there's anyone around, because there was another tour taking place, but it was on the other side. And so we were the only one in that side of the building. And so that is the extent of my paranormal experience there. Otherwise, you just have a lot of pockets of extra cold that doesn't quite make sense. And I experienced uncomfortable energies in a couple of different places. And then when we were leaving, the stupid sensation kind of clung a little bit longer than I wanted to, and I felt a little bit mildly sick from it. So that was what I experienced at Waverly as your little sub story at the end of this lovely chapter of this story that I am enjoying, and that I'm going to wrap up this video, and I can't wait. I'm looking forward to reading the next chapter. And what it says 14, so I guess it's 14 page. We're on we just finished, I think, is it 18 or 19? It was 18. So I'm excited to read on to 19, which I don't have. I have to, did I scroll back up? No, I read 19. So I'm ready for 20. Yes. And Barb is finally getting a clue. I've looped back to my focus, but sensations, energy, Barb's even cluing in on this. It's about time she caught up to the rest. I bet she dismisses it the next time we revisit her. I bet she's trying to start rationalizing with herself, because she seems the type. I mean, she's going to give this a half a second thought, and then she's going to quickly dismiss it and rationalize. Bet you anything. I can't wait to find out. All right. I'll see you guys next time on Mystery Red Reads.